We're live.
Woo!
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I think we're gonna hang out here for a bit to make sure people get on. But as always, it's myself, Erica, joined with Jared and Joanne, 3 creative recruiters who all happen to be in New York City area, slightly upstate for some of you. And then today we are joined by Frank Harris, who is actually someone on the product side. So I think we've all been looking forward to this. I'll have him do a longer intro, but he's cool because he's had, both three things, engineering to design to product in his life on the sort of in-house side of things, starting out over at Google. I think he's got a bunch of great stories about that. And then how he sort of transitioned to product and now still something else. So we're going to talk about maybe what's next for Frank. But Frank, do you want to say hello?
Sure. Hello.
Oh, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Hello. No, it's great. This is a perfect.
We're awkward.
No, perfect. We didn't drop the.
It's unfiltered and awkward.
It's great. It's great. It's unfiltered. That's what I hear.
That's it. Nailed it. Now
that segue, huh? I'm super jazzed to be here. But yeah, just a quick background about myself. I began my career as an engineer. I still write code today. No one pays me to write code. That's the only difference. But I began my career as an engineer, and then I moved to New York about 16 years ago as a designer at Google, and that was incredible. And then I went to the dark side of product management, and kind of been there ever since. Kind of feeling my way through, trying to figure out what a product manager is, what makes them great, how to motivate them, kind of the role that they play on teams. But yeah, I mean, that's just super high level. That's me in a nutshell. I'm open to answer any questions folks have.
I love that.
We can talk about why product managers are challenging to work with. We can talk about what product managers really think about designers, whatever you guys want. I'm open to it.
I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, we don't always have PM guests, and I think it's such an important part of product design specifically, right? So it's nice to have access.
We don't have access
in this
to you
arena, in this format, which is great. But Erica, we always like kicking off with some questions. So
I think we wanted to ask, where are people calling, phoning, logging in from? We would love to know.
Jamison, Yash, anyone, let us know where you are.
And then Joanne, what was the other question that you had just said about the? I don't know.
Well, since y'all are mostly an audience of designers, we have some product people too. We got Will always shows up. He's a product person. I don't know if Will is here, but if you're here, Will, hello. And other product people, of course, are always welcome. Mm-hmm. But since I think the majority of our audience is designers, hi, Powell. How do you feel about your relationships with product, your specific individual relationship? So 1 being contentious, and then 10 being just Lucy and Desi Arnaz, just in love. Just in love. I guess
finishing,
they great.
Finishing each other's sentences, maybe, right? Your mind melding.
Love affair.
Okay.
Yeah.
10 is this, and 1 is, okay, not getting along, not so good. And be honest.
Yeah, be honest.
Because I definitely speak to designers that, don't always have great things to say about the product partners that they have, or how they feel maybe a company sets up, the relationship between design and product. We have the age-old hassle of why does design report into product? I know people love to talk about that one. So
that's a good one, Jared. I like that.
Yeah, so I think if you are a designer from San Francisco, Indiana, New York City, Boston, Ann Arbor, and you work with product people, what's your jam on them? What's your vibe? And don't take it personally, Frank. It's not necessarily
I think he wants.
I felt it all. I've been on all sides of it.
Be unfiltered, our viewers, please.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
And I love that people are calling in from so many different places. We got Powell. Hi, Powell. Welcome back.
Yeah.
NYC.
You legend.
Yeah. Jameson from Boston. I'm going to Boston next week.
Okay. You should meet Jameson.
I know. I'm going to be traipsing around with my first ever friend that I made in New York. She's like,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Such a good friend that she left New York.
No, she's from Boston. She came down to New York, but she was like, I'd have this Yankees lighter, and everybody in Boston would just slag her for it all the time.
Oh,
so
nice.
she's like always like a New Yorker. We got Leslie in San Francisco. Hello, Chad Weatherby. Hi, Chad in Philly. Pradnya in Indiana.
Love that. Mostly US today. Yeah. Sometimes we have some of our international friends.
Yeah.
Suze, we got another Boston. Hi. Matthew Marco.
Frank, what would you say your relationship with design is out of 10?
Let's get this going.
That's a good one. Flipping the tables.
Yeah.
I mean,
Powell just asked that question too. Okay, great minds think alike. Thanks, man.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
nice.
Be honest.
Yeah, look, it varies, right? There's at its best when I work with designers, I feel like a true partnership.
Yep.
Right, and I feel like working with them and talking to them about maybe product strategy or what's on my mind is beneficial to me.
Okay.
Right, like it helps me think through the work and what we're trying to do and how I'm trying to change consumer behavior. At its worst, it feels like not a great handoff.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It feels transactional.
Right.
It feels like we're jumping into design, or I'm being asked to join like a rigid process, right? Or like an existing playbook, right? Like I want to co-create. I want things to be messy, like in a generative way, right?
Yes. Okay.
And maybe that's because I was a designer, or because an engineer, that I want lines to be blurred and highly collaborative. That's what I crave for in a partner. Like I think of him as a true partner.
Right.
Right. So it can vary.
In your experience with you've worked as a PM in a couple of different companies now, so you've potentially walked into different processes when you've gotten there. Your PM partners, that often pod setups, right? PM, designer, engineer, and so you're working alongside other PMs who have the same profession as you. Do they share these sentiments that you do about co-creating versus handoff? Do you think the majority of PMs think that way?
Here's what I'd say. When I'm leading a team, when I'm leading a group of PMs, that's my expectation.
You set that tone and you say, this is how we're going to co-create. We try to.
I might have some people that I used to manage on this call, and they should chime in to whether I was actually effective at doing that.
Yeah.
But that is my intent, right? Like I always tell my team, I want to build a team in which I would want to work on.
Okay.
And to me, that means having autonomy and clear ownership, clear expectations, right? And highly collaborative. And so, if a product is reporting it to me, I'm leading a team, and a product manager comes to me with a challenge that they're working on. One of the first questions I always ask is, how does your design engineering partner feel about this?
Right. Yeah.
Because I'm expecting you to talk to them about it too.
Yeah.
Right.
Do they share this problem? Partners. Do they? Yeah.
I do try to push on that and model that.
Influence that out to your other PMs. Yeah. Okay.
For sure.
Okay. I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for designers to get this inside angle on product management, and even just from the angle of in any interview process, pretty much as a product designer, when you're going through that interview process, you're more than likely going to interview with product management somewhere in there. Right. They're going to sit in maybe on your portfolio presentation. maybe you're going to have a one-on-one with a product partner, but I just feel like product is really part of the design hiring process. And that's another person you need to get along with really well.
Yeah.
Here's your chance to learn how to impress a product manager.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, and I say this with like love. Right? I'm saying,
you have to preface it with that then.
I'm saying this with love. Things just got quiet and real right now.
Yeah.
I think if I were to think about product management, design, engineering, I think one of the differences that I see between those three teams is designers tend to have a stronger point of view on what their process is and their craft versus the other disciplines. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, because it is good and bad, right? But it can make it difficult to connect with a role that is it can make it difficult to connect with others that are not designers.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then that can get in the way of that collaboration. So I like the best designers that I've worked with can figure out how to bridge that gap, to figure out how to bring others along. And they're not sacrificing quality or their process, but instead they recognize they're talking to a different audience.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. One that they value, one that they want to be part of the conversation, right? But recognizing that they might need to accommodate them in some way. Or share their work, or share their reasoning, or try to better understand a PM's point of view or the PM's motivation. I do think sometimes design can just be a little rigid in their process. And again, I think it comes from the best. I think it's great intent. I just think it can get in the way of collaboration and blurring lines across a team. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, what are some like practical, actionable ways that designers can bridge that gap? Can be more flexible with their process? How can they forge really awesome relationships with product? Specifically, like if they're going to a meeting, like what can they do?
I think it's so everything I'm going to say here, I think PM should do as well. Just to be clear, right? Like it's not like it's only one team's responsibility. We all share that responsibility. I think sometimes design works in isolation.
Okay.
Right. And I think as much as designers can show not only their work but their thought process, and maybe understanding and aligning with product on goals and assumptions as early as possible, right? Like one thing that I always ask my PMs to do whenever we're doing any sort of planning or collecting ideas is to write a one pager, and the first section of that one pager is always assumptions. And it goes something like some form of like assumptions, like opportunities, which are things we could do, and then like recommendations on what we should do. And whenever we sit around and we discuss that one pager, we spend the appropriate amount of time on that first section of assumptions. Because if you are not aligned on assumptions, everything else is just going to be like gears grinding, right?
Yeah.
And you might spend 2 whole meetings banging out in the assumptions. That's time well spent.
Okay.
Right. And so I see sometimes that it's clear that a team might have jumped over that step as they move in designs or user research, or like, it's like, well, wait a second, I don't know if we're on the same page.
Right.
And just to understand what assumptions means, can you give some sample assumptions of what might have cropped up?
Yeah. So, it could be everything from like the North Star metric. Like the reason why we're building a particular feature is to generate buzz from influencers. It's not to generate revenue directly, as an example.
Buzz is the metric we want. We want a signal.
Totally, right? We want people to talk
increase in buzz. Yep.
Right? Like when I was at Etsy, one of the features that I inherited when I was there was the ability to search Etsy by color. And it was like this, it was a Flash app that was built by like one of the founders of Etsy. It was like
classic.
It was terrible. I mean, it was terrible, but for like 4 years, every press article that was ever written about Etsy talked about this.
Wow.
Oops.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm not suggesting the reason why someone created this feature was for press, right? But when we eventually shut it down, and part of it, when we were thinking about like what's the value of it, someone's like, well, no sales come from it, and that's like, okay, true, no sales do come from it. However, it's kind of part of Etsy's like, you know, ethos of this like fun online flea market to like explore, you know. So I say that because the assumptions really help guide the work. And how you might evaluate if something's working or not working. So I think North Star metrics, sometimes people have like, they might say goals or like anti-goals, right? That could also be an assumption. The amount of time you have to spend something. I'm assuming we're only able to work on this for 2 sprints.
Okay.
Like,
therefore, we need to.
Right, exactly,
Okay.
right? Like, if we're not on the same page there, like I might see design explorations that are completely different, right? What could be another assumption? We believe the persona that we're going after is X. Now, that assumption could have come from an executive that may or may not be right.
Actually,
right?
Right. So it may not be research. It might be just like a idea.
Totally. It might come from a strong opinion, right? And so maybe we want to challenge that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. It sounds like with a lot of this too, this is really around like this co-creating thing that you touched on earlier, and having them all in the same room right at the start versus maybe products making these decisions, deciding on these assumptions, and then handing that later to say your design partners and saying, here you go, cool, we figured it out, so now you're going to do your next part. So no, let's start together at the start.
That's it, And I think that's right. Again, I try to challenge my team on like, tell me about the project in the last 24 months that you've enjoyed the most.
Right.
Why did you enjoy it so much?
Yeah.
Right. Like why was it great? What was the connection like with the team? Did your work feel valued? Why was that? Why did the work feel valued? Was it because literally every design you came up with, the PM agreed to? That's probably not why your work felt valued.
Right.
Right. It probably wasn't like that easy of a slam dunk. I actually sometimes feel like when you don't have any friction working with someone, those are not the best experiences either.
That'd be too superficial. What are you looking for in those answers? When you ask somebody, like, what was the most exciting project you worked on in the last 2 years? What are you looking for? And what are you kind of gauging things on?
I'm looking for them. I'm looking for them to have the ability to kind of reflect on what collaboration feels like, what successful collaboration feels like, and then talk about the behaviors that facilitate that make that easy, that might make that hard, right? That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. You're not necessarily looking for like, oh, this was a massive success with like great, KPIs, whatever else. It's like really kind of more the process and how they work through.
I mean, it could be KPIs, but I mean, KPIs are measured at the end, right? I mean, yes, you can measure them, but I mean, like, there's a lot of time that we spend with people in our days that are about the lead up to being able to launch something, right? The largest part of the journey is the creating part. And so I would hope that we would be able to articulate what feels right in those moments, even before we're able to evaluate maybe commercial success or business goals. Like, what are one thing we talked about at Etsy and other places, like when I run a lot of experiments, is initially at first our intuition is usually pretty terrible, right? Okay. Well-intentioned but terrible, and you learn by doing experiments. Yep. And there's no such thing as a failed experiment unless you learn nothing from it. right? And it's over time you build, and build different ideas, intuition, and you start understanding the problem you're solving for to a degree in which you couldn't from the sidelines where you started.
Okay.
So how do you be successful when you run experiments? You create an engine that makes it really easy to run experiments.
To run them, to crank through them, yeah.
To crank through them and to evaluate them, right? Instead of it being like this precious thing. If you can only run one experiment, like it's just, like you don't even invest in trying to run the experiment at that point. Right? How many, sports metaphor, how many swings at the plate, right? How do I increase my swings at the plate? And so I think part of like trying to understand like what works with collaborating with others and what isn't is trying to increase those odds, right? To create those better conditions in which it can lead to successful outcomes.
Yeah. What would you go back and tell your designer self after all these years as being a PM? Because you talk about tension. We know that sometimes it can feel like this strained relationship. I know when we caught up the other day too, you would talk about how much you'd learned since becoming a product manager. But if you could go back to your old designer self and maybe give them tips on how to better collaborate with PMs or how to play nicer, where would you tell former Frank to start? Where would he start? Where was he getting it wrong maybe?
At my worst as a designer, I could have been more curious about my product manager's motivations and intentions.
Okay.
I think I probably made too many assumptions.
Hey.
Right?
What assuming
about
does.
what this were. And that's like pretty dangerous.
Okay.
I think that like probably the worst thing that I ever did to a PM when I was working at Google, and I'm sure I'm not unique in any of this. Well, maybe what I did was unique, but the feeling I'm about to describe is nothing would drive me more crazy when I was a designer than when a PM would send me a mock of something that they did.
Right.
That
you're just like, what are you?
I mean, I'm just like,
how dare you?
Get the fuck
Stay
out
in your lane.
Right? Yeah, I'm just like, because the design they would always send me would be some cherry-picked state. Right? And I'm just like, cool. But like, what about the other 500 states? How is someone going to get here? Where do we take them afterwards? Like, if you want to do design, cool. Like, let's get in the trenches with me. Okay. Don't just do this like cherry-pick thing. And so I want, so at Google, as you would expect, has like this IT help desk where you could like submit tickets, and I want to submit it, and you can submit tickets to have someone else. Like if someone needs like access to a particular system, I might be like, hey, Jared needs access. He's on my team. He needs access to the system. Like make it happen, right? So I totally abused the system, and I created a ticket to go to the PM's desk to uninstall. They were using Photoshop.
Yeah.
And
Awesome,
and I mean that was like
petty.
the most passive. I mean, like I'm like 27 years old, right? Like the most passive aggressive thing.
The ego on this guy.
It's unbelievable, right? And I get a message from the PM. Why is tech stop at my desk? And I was like, don't you ever send me another design. Don't do that. That's terrible. Don't do that. But I
the point across.
It's really bad. No. Like I'm very embarrassed. I mean, it's funny, but I'm embarrassed by it. And the fact that like the PM didn't like kill me is amazing. But really try to better understand. Like the PM, I think PMs are trying to always balance a lot of things. PMs have a hard job working with engineering, with design. Working with marketing or business, sometimes they have other responsibilities that you might not be aware of. And I think it's totally fair and reasonable to say, tell me more about what you're trying to optimize for.
Yeah, what's the goal here?
Because like we talked about this problem and I'm going in this direction, but when I'm a designer, when I present it back to you, it doesn't feel like it's landing.
Yeah.
Right. So like what am I missing? That's a question I love to ask people when I'm working with them. Like, what am I missing? Where's my blind spot? I'm sure I have a blind spot here. I'm sure you see something that I don't see. I would like to better understand what you're seeing, right? And I think that's like kind of a bit more of a graceful way to kind of get in their head a little bit. Right. And I also think that's language that says like, "Hey, I want to be your partner."
Right.
I want to collaborate. I want to
collaborate, right?
That's the sentiment. That's what you would tell former Frank is like, hey,
sure.
Be open to collaborating a bit more. Do this together.
Well, I mean, like I wanted to collaborate, but I wanted to collaborate in my particular way.
Right. Oh, the design process, your process.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like uncollaborative collaboration.
Totally. And it's just like so I think I needed to be more curious about their way. And to be fair, they might not even have a way. They might be trying to wrestle with what the way
They're not
is,
sure what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like what Jameson just wrote in the chat. He says, when a partner from another team sends me amateur designs, I take it as an invite to bring them along with us. I always say we're all designers. Some of us just have way more practice at it. Let's collab.
That's a good way to spin it, Jameson. Good attitude.
Yeah. Very astute.
I would have erred on the side of Frank's former self. Probably I would have got the shits and go, what is this? But
I think
Jameson,
I don't know Jameson, but to have for Jameson to have that point of view, like you also have to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's like that can be super hard, especially early in your career.
Yeah.
Right. Or if you feel like your org or your fixture or your function isn't well valued, like it's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable then.
Yeah, you don't want to show any weakness because you already feel behind the 8 ball, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now I feel you're starting to tread close to that territory of design versus product and feeling like they're not able to do what design does in some way. And it's this fine line of like, how do you collaborate but not let product maybe rule the roost necessarily?
Well, I mean, product's the CEO of every feature, right?
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah. Right. So, and that's that
I mean, it's not true.
Yeah. Not true. And maybe designers are arriving at the pod already thinking that that's what they're up against. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe what design maybe designers realize this, but I think that look, the grass is always greener, right? Like design feels like sometimes I've heard things like design feels like they're not in the room or their work is not as valued or they're not making the product strategy or no one can hear them on their product strategy.
Yep.
That the PM is like the CEO of the product or whatever. I'll hear PM saying, I can't get the designer on board and me writing Word documents is not going to launch this feature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Like, both sides feels like the other one has like this asymmetrical power over them. It's not.
Yeah, I hear you.
Product can't be successful without design.
And vice versa, yeah.
I mean, both sides. It's really like we're talking a lot about like communication skills, right?
Yeah.
So I guess like how do you improve your communication skills like on your teams? I know a lot of right now, like the recs for hiring designers, hiring product people is strong collaboration and strong communication skills, right? But I think you had told us maybe yesterday about something that you did like to improve your communication skills. So could you talk about that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we say it so often that you have to have strong communication skills and collaboration skills. That's can almost kind of become like meaningless because we say it so much. But I think the story I was sharing with you all yesterday, I guess it was no concept of time. Proud dad of 2 small children, no concept of time. But I was at Google and I was working on Google News, and my main 2 stakeholders was the first PM of Google News and the person that created Google News. So the first PM of Google News was Marissa Mayer, and brilliant, absolutely brilliant woman, product thinker, like incredible, learned so much from her. Also like employee 14 at the company. That's all, right? And the person that created Google News was maybe like employee 60, and like opened up the entire like office in India. Yeah. So very, very accomplished, smart people. People have a tremendous amount. I have a tremendous amount of respect for. But I'm working on Google News, and I'm the designer. And every time I would try to pitch some new design that we were working on, I felt incredibly ineffective. Like, it was one of the lowest points in my career, and it shook me. It like shook me very hard, because it was probably my second year at Google, so I had just moved to a new city that I'd only spent in a weekend, and before moving up. In some ways, I felt like I was more accomplished than my wildest dreams. You know, like my mom is an educator, and like my second job out of college, I'm making more money than she ever did in her career, right? And so it's like, so I have these signals of like, you're successful, you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, right? And another time, like I'm trying to communicate designs, and design is all about communication, and I am just failing miserably to people I have a tremendous amount of respect for. So like, this is like the mind fuck of mind fucks for me. There's no way I can feel good about myself, and I'm just like confused. And I sought out coaching and therapy. And that is when I learned for the first time that you really have to understand who you're talking to be effective. I'll take that a step further. You have to speak in a way that your audience can hear you. Mm-hmm. And I had not yet worked with the kind of engineering and product leader that Marissa and Krishna are. And so I was looking in my toolbox, you know, and I was picking up my tools that I'd been successful with all along, and I'm trying to use them, and all the effort in the world, terrible tactics, right? Ineffective, because they couldn't hear me. And so since then I've been trying, I really try to practice like a few things. One is trying to understand the way to like meet someone at their level, right? Asking questions about them, listening to them, being an active listener is like really helps with that. Also like approaching, this is like a little cynical, but like take it conceptually for what I'm saying here. Approach every interaction or conversation as a negotiation, right? That's going to push you to understand what someone else's goals are. And the more that you can show how someone else's goals are the same as your goals, right? You're going to hear that. So, you know, I think that, so Paolo asked, what was the mistake I was making? I was leaning too much of why I thought something was important, maybe, or why this design was right, right? But it wasn't meeting their needs. And I wasn't trying to figure out what their needs were. And I wasn't talking of, like, I would say, like, maybe I might talk about design as being aesthetically beneficial, right? Or one of the big goals of Google News was information density. So, you know, let's say I wasn't optimizing for that, right? Or the way I would talk about maybe the user experience, like it was completely separate from how they had thought of it. Again, it's not right or wrong. It's, well, clearly there's going to be friction here, right? And especially as you deal with more and more senior folks in your career, you get less and less time with them. Like individual, like they're smaller chunks, I guess is what I'm saying. And so you have to, like, the more you can be concise and tight on what you're talking about, the more beneficial it is. So, so I tend to think of communication as effort-related work that anyone can be good at it. You just have to put in time and have curiosity and want to kind of get better at it. That might not be a great answer, but that's
it really is.
I think about it.
It's such a thing, isn't it? I feel like it gets glazed over a little bit. too much when we think about skills in our profession as a designer or as a pro. You think, okay, I've got 1 hour to improve my skills. How will I improve? I know I'll work on some new Figma plugins and I'll do some work on this chart. I don't know. The last thing you often think about is, I'll do some work on my communication skills and how to be a better active listener. Or, it feels so low in the ranking of skills to improve. Yet, from what you're saying, it's like it almost needs to be number one, like for everyone.
I mean, I was coaching someone the other day, and they were talking about how they were having some friction. We all have friction, right? We all have friction with maybe different people, and they were just like, and it bummed them out because they clearly respect this person, right? And they feel like maybe on some level that they're not like showing up, right? And I was like, well, how do you know you're not like showing up, right?
Right.
Sometimes we can get in our heads and we think we know what's happening, and we don't know what's happening. Right? And they were like, well, I've kind of gotten some feedback from my boss or from this other person, kind of related to it, and they're like, is so and so like, they ask if I'm like angry or like if I'm upset or if I'm like frustrated or whatever. And I was like, like what's like interesting to me about that is they're not talking about your content.
Right. It's a delivery.
They're not talking about your ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They might love your ideas. Or maybe they don't know what your ideas are.
Yeah.
But like it's for some we're still like unpacking this, but it's like, to me, that's like it happens all the time where it's like your ideas won't even get to the point where they might even win on merit if there's tension in collaboration and delivery.
Yeah, such a good point. Yeah, and this is a whole tangent. I see it all the time with like even just cultural differences. I'm Australian. Sure. I've had it recently with a couple of things where companies have said, we can't tell if that designer's really interested in us, when they interview with us. And I'm like, they're Australian, mate. They're not, they're not jumping out of their skin about anything. Like they're cool, calm, they're just chill. Don't take it. And then it's like grabbing an email from them where it says, hey, I'm really excited about this opportunity. Thanks so much for setting me up with them. I'm like, it's just communication style. It's okay. Maybe it got lost in translation, but yeah, that's a tangent on the culture. But it just is that point of delivery and of communication. And what I guess, as part of your coaching too, you're likely telling people how to communicate better, but also how can we be better listeners and not make that assumption. I don't think they're interested in us, so therefore let's not even do the next interview. It's like, whoa. Like, that person has all the skills you want, and you love it. You're in this right direction, and because you've made that assumption based on a delivery difference there, it's like
as humans, we love to make things like really complicated, or like we're really good at it. Like, we're really good at making things complicated, and we will like. Like the what is it? Is the movie's like A Beautiful Mind, right? Where he has like the strings. We will do that.
Yeah.
Versus ask direct questions.
Yeah. Are you interested in us?
I know. Well, totally. Well, I love the story that you told us, Frank, yesterday when we all had a little pregame meet where you said you were racking your brains, like, how do I communicate with my team or these people that I have to collaborate with, and maybe I'm having a tough time doing it. And you're doing the John Nash thing, and you're trying to figure out every which way. And then finally, it's like, I think it was your coach or something said,
my coach.
Why don't you just ask them how they want to communicate? It's like, go straight to the horse's mouth.
Yeah, I was leading a team at the moment. It was the largest team I'd ever led before, and I had imposter syndrome. I still have imposter syndrome about different things, right? And I felt very stretched. I remember this. It's like every time I'd show up into a meeting, I would have left another meeting, and I had like enough. This is when I went to the office, but just enough time to get from one room to the next room. And I didn't feel like what I'd want to do is I'd want to be prepare for that meeting. I want to collect my thoughts. I'd maybe, if we were talking about designs, I'd want to review the designs ahead of time, right? Instead of having gut reactions in the moment, because I remember when people gave me gut reactions in the moment. So it's like and I felt like the team wasn't getting their best from me. And I could make excuses on why, that I was really stretched thin. I was taking on some other large parts of the organization I'd never done before. I'm trying to find my way. And I felt so bad. And my coach was like, well, like, how do you know you're telling me you're failing, but how do you know you're failing? And I was like, well, because I'm not prepared for these meetings. And he's like, but like, what, like, does your team need you to be more prepared? Like, are you blocking them? Are they, is their work being impacted, like, and he's like, how would you know? And I was like, well, I mean, I guess, let me think about this. Let me look at the notes from the last 3 sessions, and I can let me review our success metrics over the last 6 months. And he's like, what else could you do, idiot? Like, and he's like, you could ask them. What is it? Hey, I'm really stretched thin right now. I'm trying to take on this other work. Like, what do you need from me over the next 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you getting what you need from me right now? Do you need me to lean in more? Do you need me to lean out? Like, these are conversation starters. I want to be very clear.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
This doesn't fix. I still had work to do, right?
Yeah.
But
where it starts.
But now you had guided direction.
Right. Where
I
did the efforts?
It helped me focus on where I needed to spend some spring cycles, and where maybe I didn't have to at all. And I could come off my plate so I could spend more time in other areas. Because the moment I felt like I was doing failure in every area. Right?
Yeah.
So it helped to focus me.
Yeah.
Assumptions, I don't know. That's like
coming back to that.
That should be our code word for today, by the way. Assumptions.
Yeah.
Assumptions. That's a big one that came out of it. We have about 17 more minutes left in our live stream. So I thought maybe we could turn it over to the audience members and your questions. We've been kind of doing it a little bit as we go along.
Yeah.
So everybody in the audience, please pop a question into the chat of things you'd like to ask Frank.
Should we also announce?
Yes, I was also going to say too, Frank, why don't you tell us a little bit about your coaching, like what you're up to, and maybe how people could work with you?
Yeah, for sure. So this summer I started my own coaching practice. As you guys can probably tell, like, this is something that's been on my mind a lot and pretty important to me. And I'm trying to create this practice as the coach that I kind of wish I had all along in every stage of my career. And so a lot of times that's a sounding board, on a safe place to kind of talk through things and kind of maybe think about things in a slightly different way and have a different perspective. I tend to think we grow, period, but especially professionally, when 2 things happen. One is when we're slightly uncomfortable and we're trying to do something that we've never done before in some way. And the other is when we have time to reflect and think about that experience. And part of what I love about coaching, which is different from managing, is when you say you want to coach, you're like raising your hand and you're saying, I want to grow. I want to be a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe not every day, maybe not in today's session, but like permission to help me grow, right?
Level up.
And so I'm looking for folks to do that with. That's kind of where I'm at. And I wanted to offer everyone that's live on today's stream, if you want to, no strings attached. You don't have to. We can still be friends. A free coaching session.
Mate, that is huge.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Very generous.
I really hope. I think I'll probably sign up for one. Do we get the opportunity to count, Russ?
Yeah.
Anyone. It's all good. It's all good. But I think we have a link that we can share.
Yeah.
We'll share that link.
Did you add a special word to your form? Or?
Assumptions.
Assumptions.
That's the word.
In the form. I think there's a question just to what's the password or code word or something. Joanne just wants to make sure, and I think she's right, that thousands of people don't do this. So assumptions or some form of that. I'm not going to grade that too hard, but like,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Frank. That is such a beautiful.
That's huge. Yeah.
It's really,
I just
really
can think of
nice.
so many ways that I think designers, which is just because it's mostly our audience, right? But any people in this tech space can benefit from, having that insight that you've got, some of these communication skills you've touched on, the places you've worked, Etsy, Google, Slack, right? Yeah.
Those are true. Yeah. It's a great.
Yeah, these are amazing high performance environments. What makes an environment like that high performance, and how can any of these people potentially strive towards that? I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think really more than anything, it's like not process, right? It's the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember when I joined Google and I went back to Washington. I was at Washington Post before Google, and I went in. I don't know. I came back to DC a few months after I joined Google, and some of my friends were like, "What's it like to work at Google?" And like, I'm curious, like, what's the process for this or that? Because I'm sure it's like so great. And I was like, actually, Google's processes are like kind of terrible, or they're like no different than this. It's the people.
Secret sauce. Yeah. It's not, the people. Yeah. But within that too, do you think some of that, the way that such great things are achieved by, Google News and things like that, is great people that are able to work together really greatly?
That's when I've had the most fun.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've grown the most of my career. Like, maybe there's some story. You can read all these stories about like how that first products are built, or like the most successful products are built. A lot of survivor bias there, right? Mm-hmm. But like, I can't think, someone can remind me, but I cannot think of an example of one of those stories where it was like, and we hated each other.
Right.
The entire time, right? Maybe there was like, this person pushed me and was demanding. That's like fine. Like, again, that's how we grow. We're slightly uncomfortable, right? But yeah, I think you have to have, it feels foundational. Another way I think about this is, part of the reason why I love to work with people I've worked with elsewhere in my career, where I like to work with them again, is because so much time we spend in our jobs when we work with others to try to figure out what makes them tick. Mm. And to know that already, and then to actually just do the work is magical.
Yeah. Shorthand. You can just get right into it. Yeah. I love that. I'm going to put a question in the chat. Everybody, you have this incredible brain in Frank here at your disposal. So everybody put a question in the chat. I'm going to put a question in that Powell had put in earlier, which is, how do you handle opinion-based decisions in a highly collaborative environment? Do you appreciate them or avoid them? Data decisions only?
That's a good question. I love data. To really stress how much I love data, my wife leads data teams. And I met her working where she was the data analyst on my product team that I worked with. I love it. So I love data. I think there can be I think you can, if you're only making data decisions, it can lead to some blind spots. So I like to be a little bit more data informed. I generally hate surprises, kind of period. Whether they're good or bad. And so the reason why I might run experiments, the reason why I might do research on something is to not be surprised, to better understand what I'm doing, what I'm driving towards, right? So I data's powerful, and I think that's both quant and qual. And in the best experiences, one should be feeding the other with how we think about studies and experiments. I have every place that I've worked has had highly opinionated product decisions, strategies, ideas. So if you can find a place that doesn't have it, like, please let me know. But otherwise, I'm just going to accept it as a given, right? And so I think they exist. What I also want to believe is that if everyone is on the same page about the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, that we should be relatively agnostic about how we accomplish them. Mm-hmm. So if the CEO has a particular point of view on something that's very opinionated on how he thinks that should be done, in my experience, you can't dismiss that. You have to hear that, right? You have to incorporate it either literally or like spiritually in your work. Even if you feel like it might be missing the mark on something, if it doesn't lead to the outcome, well, then you'll work on something. You'll take another swing at something else.
Sure.
It's very hard to argue with people's opinions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like, let's try to get to a place where it's like more evidence based.
Okay.
Which is maybe like lowercase d, not uppercase d data, but like again, if we're aligned, if we have shared assumptions of what we're trying to achieve, that's going to do the heavy lifting on evaluating if something's working.
Yeah.
So then it just becomes a sequencing order, right? Are we going to do this opinionated idea that I think is dog shit first, or are we going to do some like bottoms up that the team has been like working on and crafting on, and like, you know, and that might be a conversation I have with the CEO. Hey man, it's your company.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want. Let me tell you, right? You're coming at it from a different point of view as this person. And at the end of the day, like, we're going to do whatever is going to work for our customers because we're aligned on what our goal is, right? So this might be an opportunity where we could go bottoms up here, throw the team a bone, let them do theirs first. But you're keeping score on what's working, what's not working.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. Maybe, you know, or if you're really adamant that this is not a time for us to deviate and we got, you know, okay, we can do that. But I'm telling you, if we always make decisions that way, that's going to undermine the team.
Right. Eventually. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Good point on that.
Like when we talk with clients, sometimes it's like we try to avoid having just an opinion as like a reason why to do something. We try to tell stories, right? So it's like in the past, if a decision like this is being made, this is what the outcome tends to be. You can't really argue with facts, right? Like these are stories, these are anecdotes, these are things that have happened versus we don't think that's a great idea because we think this will probably happen, right?
Yeah.
But it's like
just
actually having evidence.
So true.
Yeah,
I've also like going back to CEOs with strong opinions. A lot of times too, when that CEO has been the founder, it's actually not an opinion.
Right.
That they actually do have evidence for why they think that is the right approach. What they haven't done is communicate that.
Yeah.
So it's coming across as this arbitrary idea, right? Because they see something that I don't see, that the team doesn't see. And they see that something because they were working on this idea 5 years before we even joined the company. Talking to customers and, you know, so it's like, you feel very passionate about this idea. Like, help me understand that more.
Yeah, it's like the question you were asking earlier. What am I missing? Like,
what am I missing? I know I'm missing something.
Yeah.
You're not a dum-dum. You're very passionate about this idea. So clearly, I'm missing something.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Maybe there's a way I can feed that to the team so it's not your idea versus their idea. You know, that they kind of come to that.
I have a question. We're almost like out of time, but I just always like to ask people, what kinds of platforms or products are you like obsessed with right now? Like, what are you using AI wise? Not even anything.
I mean, I'm trying to use as much AI as possible for like everything. And it's like a super big like umbrella term, but early in my career when I was a designer, even in my first few years as a PM, the way I would collect my thoughts is by wireframing. I would jokingly tell people that I use, I'm dating myself, but I use OmniGraffle for my grocery list, right? Like that was just, it was just how I process the world. And increasingly, you know, as I got further from being a designer and more from like leading a team and trying to work on like storytelling and whatnot, words is how I collect my thoughts, writing words. And I try to use all the tools, but I really do love Claude. And Claude, I think of it as like a bit of a second brain and thought partner.
Wow.
For how I think through things, that I can just like, I literally do this. I like to do this on the subway a lot. It's like my guilty pleasure, where it's like I open up the Claude in my app and I just dump a whole bunch of thoughts that I have, and I'm like, organize this in something that's like concise and like, what are my big takeaways, right? And then you know, we go under a tunnel or something like that, and I lose service. And then when I get service back, it's like this magical thing. I'm like, oh, like this is like quite interesting. So Claude is like helping me accelerate my thoughts, and I really love that. The other thing that I think Claude is exceptional at, and I think that, and again, use Claude or whatever tool. Like they're more like than not. But like as designers, one of the activities that I always like kind of facilitate with as a designer and also as a PM for like design thinking is the how might we exercise. Are you familiar with this? I can't see if people are not. I see if you guys are nodding your head.
Yes, I've heard of it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like this, you know, brainstorming activity where you kind of use questions to help like better understand like a problem or like a mental model. And it's like one idea per like Post-it notes, and you put all the Post-it notes on the board, and then you start grouping them, and then it's this very like collaborative sort of engagement, right? Something you might do at like the beginning of a project or early on. Claude is great with how might we questions.
Ooh,
okay.
Good tip.
Here, I have this idea of this thing that I want to solve. Like, what are some like how might we topics that I should be like thinking through on this? So then like it'll spit those out. Okay, let's like take 2 or 3. Let's go a level deeper in that, right?
Sounds like a good prompt for some of this communication side of things too. How might I better?
How might I, or like,
discuss,
you know, it's good. I think it's good at. It's been helpful for me to see like, to be more concise and like clear.
Yeah.
Some thinking, but also other perspectives.
Yeah. And I like that it's might as opposed to should. Right? Like,
no, that's like, exactly right.
Right? It's like it leaves an openness. It's a freedom of thought. It feels really good. Yeah.
I love that. I use ChatGPT for similar stuff. I haven't done Claude full yet, but I know a lot of people who love it for this.
Yeah.
I love writing and I like to edit. Like my whole thing on AI also is I want AI to do everything, but I want to make these executive decisions and like strategy choices and help edit it at the end. But if I sit there and try to think of something, it's going to take me a couple hours. Like I'm going to get also really distracted. So that's why I'm using AI, honestly.
I don't use it for anything.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to give you something, Jared, just for you to think
about.
Right? So one of the cool things about Claude is they have this concept of projects. Okay. And so you go into Claude and you create a project, and let's say you call that project like well, I have one. I have a project called like long form writing. Things I want to write about, right? And within projects, you can give context or like instructions that will be used every time you interact with an item in that project.
Setting.
So instead of having to like always kind of set the table with each new prompt, like you can have, you know. And so I upload writings that I'm proud of. Okay. Right. So Claude can understand my writing style or the way I think. And then when I ask it questions, I'm like, phrase it and sound like me.
Speak Australian.
Right? You're like talking to yourself.
Totally, right? And you can even kind of get meta on it where it's like, you upload writings, and you're like, describe this writing style. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, now that's now your instructions going forward to always use that
writing style. Yeah.
Smart.
Or like how could I make give me feedback on this essay that I wrote. What are my blind spots? What would make it more compelling?
Do you trust the AI to give you good advice? Because I feel like the way that it writes, not if you've like fed it with your own writing perhaps, but I feel like if left to its own devices, AI writing feels really wooden. So do you trust it when you're like, hey,
look,
judge me?
I'm still in charge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe it's a self-driving car, but I'm still on the driver's seat and I can grab the steering wheel. Right? This is just to accelerate the production of it. So I can, this feedback's not relative. Let me tell you what you don't know, Claude.
Yeah.
Right? And I will say, this is why this is a terrible idea, what you just said. Don't ever say this to me again. Right? You know, or whatever.
Bad Claude.
Yeah. But it's like, I think the thing that's exciting, one of the things that's most exciting about AI to me is that the time from like idea to delivery of whatever you're writing, app, whatever, is crazy compressed, or can be in this new world, right? It's not about us changing our expectations of what things are supposed to do. It's what once took a lot longer is now can be done in seconds or minutes or hours. And what that then means is we can put it in other people's hands faster. We can learn from it. We can iterate on it more, right? And like that. Yeah. When I started as a designer, and you created designs, you would have some sort of review where you review these flat 2D designs, and then that led to to creating prototypes. I worked at a company that created prototypes, right? And that was a better way to experience a design. We always would say things like, let's do user research, let's do wireframes, let's do prototypes, because it's cheaper than writing code. We don't want to have to throw the code away. It's a lot easier to rip up a sheet of paper. Code gen with AI, I think, is kind of pushing that a little bit. Like maybe it's not necessarily easier than just writing code, because code can be written by AI. I don't know. It's just like, to me, it's just like an evolution of like compressing idea to like interaction or trying something out. So that's how I try to use it. I don't blindly like send things.
Cool. I have to pop. I have
to run. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah. But Frank, thank you so much for being here.
It
was
of course.
Having you. Yeah.
Till next time.
Have a good one.
Free coach with Frank.
Bye.